Hermit in the Himalayas by Brunton. Chapter 13. Rambling through the forest this afternoon, when only about 15 minutes distant on the homeward journey to my bungalow, I am reminded of a thing one is often likely to forget. Amid the resplendent beauties of this region, the fact that wild animals abound in this isolated kingdom. My gaze wanders aimlessly forwards, towards my right hand, when an unusual glint of color in the afternoon sunlight stops me. Half hidden in a leafy tree, I perceive a panther in an extraordinary situation. It lies along the fork between two horizontal boughs at a distance of about a dozen yards from the ground. The rounded head rests between the forepaws, and the spotted furry coat is stretched out almost full length. The beast is sound asleep. The midday sun, pouring its vertical rays upon the earth, has kindled a sultry heat, which has caught the creature in a lethargic mood and sent it off into somnolence. No other explanation can I find for its exceptionally exposed position. Its presence up in the tree is also explicable without difficulty. The ravines close by have plenty of panthers in their keeping. Generally, the beasts come out at night from their lairs, their eyes having become supernaturally sharp through the constant activity in the dark. This particular animal has wandered out at an unusual hour. Of all the forest animals, the panther is the quietest, walking very slowly, stealthily. Its soft paws make no sound, evidently to avoid disturbing a prey prematurely. It has climbed this tree, perched itself among the branches, where it may watch the surrounding area more intently, and yet remain hidden from an intended victim on which, at the psychological moment, it will pounce. My own position is unusual too. I am tired. I want to get home as quickly as possible. Yet, if I advance forward, I must pass the tree whereon the panther is sleeping and probably awaken it. I am in no mind to turn backward, much less to tarry where I am. My armament for defense consists only of a short, light bamboo cane, which I have picked up en route. It's about as useful in the circumstances as a matchstick. There is nothing left to do but to advance, so I step gingerly forward, almost on tiptoe. My caution proves useless. In the silent forest, even the slightest noise is magnified. One is alert to the rustle of a falling leaf. The panther awakes just as I am about to pass its leafy lair. This time, there is nothing to do but stand stock still and await events. The creature raises its cat-like head, then its beautiful furry body stands upright, and it peers questioningly at me with evil-looking yellow-green fiery eyes. I return its gaze just as questioningly. My pulse thumps away a good deal faster than normal. I am not a brave he-man with an overplus of physical courage and robust vigor. All I can command is a little inward stillness, so I call up my reserves of that undervalued quality which somehow brings me perhaps the same result as courage. Perceiving that I have detected it, the panther's expression changes into one of rage. It opens its jaws slightly in irritation, and the bared teeth show defiance. The ears are turned back close to the head. Then an angry snarl, which sounds like a hoarse human cough. The muscular body rises arch-like and leaps headlong to the farther side of the tree and lands in a heavy crash in the tangled growth of underwood. My last glimpse is of a long, black-tipped, twitching tail, and then the panther disappears into the forest. There are other animals in Terry's state, which neither love nor are loved by man. The black bear is common enough, whilst the leopard roams hither and thither. The wild boar leaves its ravages, whilst the tiger has now confined itself to certain tracts. But as a rule, they keep themselves quiet by daytime and stir only with the coming of darkness. Then one hears occasionally queer sounds, ominous growls while lying in bed at night, evidence of some prowling creature which has deserted its lair in the forest or ravine and is investigating the possibilities of this region. Once I flash my torchlight upon the face of a small bear, which comes grunting round my bungalow and peeps through the glass panel of the rear bedroom door. On the mountain slopes there are herds, large herds, of wild stags, wild spotted deer, and of that curious creature, the goat antelope, simple, innocent, shy, and likable creatures, which are well behaved until forced to fight for their lives with the wilder species. Then their powerful antlers come into play, and sometimes they render good account of themselves. A single panther will pursue a herd of wild deer who moan their fright until the last moment, when the necessity of defense calls up fresh courage. The barking deer is here, too, a beautiful, slender-legged animal. The black Himalayan bear is an unpleasant creature to meet suddenly. Its temper at the moment is generally the deciding factor as to whether it will attack a man or not. It has a reputation for being utterly vicious, spiteful, and destructive. A curious story one hears in these parts is of a young hunter who had seen a bear, in a forest-clothed slope above him. He fired his gun and wounded the beast slightly. Growling with rage and pain, it rushed down the mountainside at incredible speed, seized the unfortunate man, and flung him down a precipice into the chasm below. He was killed. Life, in its primal attributes, did not bring such terrors as these savage beasts have brought with them for the agonizing of two kingdoms of man and creature. I know that the materialistic evolutionists tell us of a time when man lived a bestial, cave-dwelling existence, and when gigantic animals roamed the planet with ferocious intent. That something of the kind did prevail, one need not go further than the nearest museum to discover, for the fossil remains speak eloquently. But our theorists, unfortunately, do not go back far enough, having retraced man's history and this globe's fortune to such distant epoch. They become exhausted and stop, yet the long tale did not begin there. It is like a reporter from another planet, arriving here in the midst of the last war, and then returning to his own people to tell them that the inhabitants of this earth are exclusively devoted to mutual destruction. Had he come a couple of years earlier, his report would have been differently fashioned. I cannot produce any fossils to support my contention, and I cannot find any appearances left by the earliest men as their testamentary remains. I can take no one for a walk upon the solid ground of tangible evidence. The planet of today is not the planet of yesterday, and the tremendous shifts of its surface and the vast changes in its structure which time has brought about have swept away the trifling records of eons which are now so distant that they really do not matter. Mother Earth is not concerned with preserving every testimony of her ancient history in order to provide a few scientists with materials over which their intellects may churn away in fresh theorizing. She herself is well aware of what she has done, and if puny men think otherwise, that is their affair and not hers. But if I come with arms empty of fact, when I come forward with my declaration that nature's first intent was not to begin the universe by a reign of terror, of which the spider who lusts after the fly is an apt symbol, but rather the reverse, I possess sufficient intimations of her original benevolence to satisfy my own criticisms, which at one time were perhaps more devastating than those of the scientists whose guesses I had absorbed in my innocence. Those intimations, however, do not come to me through any source which the modern world treats and respects, and it would be a futile waste of time to talk of them to the exacting audience of today. Let it suffice to state that there is a certain condition of being similar to that which exists in a semi-trance. That is, in this condition normally invisible forces may speak to man. In that way I have learned a little of the unwritten history of our race. What has emerged in this way retraces the picture of a primal age when the good, with a capital G, good, in no narrow sense was entirely dominant, and when matter was in submission to spirit. When matter was in submission to spirit. The humanity of that time lived by the light of a divine instinct and did not need to dally with the hesitations of cunning and intellect in order to understand what were its best interests. The exploitation of the weaker peoples by stronger ones did not exist and could not exist, for all men felt in their hearts the common Father, whom they worshipped as their own, universally. The animals of that age did not fear man, and had no reason to fear him, nor did they fear one another. Nature provided abundantly for their needs in a harmless way. The depredation of one species upon another was not only unnecessary, but likewise unknown. If, as I say, I have no facts and no fossils to produce so as to convince those who listen, whom I have no desire to convince, I have indeed a question. Every intelligent man that is intelligent through the experience of life and not pseudo-intelligent through the books of schools must say at one time or another with Napoleon when he gazed out of the palace window one night at a star-studded sky, do not ask me to believe that all this vast creation possesses no author. If further he admits the likelihood of this author's, this God's existence, he will have to face the problem of suffering and evil, why God allows them in our midst. Acknowledging the existence of these miseries, he will have to admit that God has deliberately introduced them into his creation, or that they have arisen of their own accord without his express intention. The only way to brook this issue is to assert upon the evidence of the mixed character of the world and of the simultaneous presence of deplorable sorrows and delightful pleasures that God created this universe whilst in a state of inebriation. This problem is without a doubt the oldest and most hoary-headed with which the thinkers of both antiquity and modernity have had to grapple. All have failed to solve it. I do not propose to trouble myself with it either. But the only messages of God to man which are readily available to us are embodied in the great religions which have appeared from time to time. We may not accept them as such, but it is unlikely that they were mere smoke without fire. It is not at all irrational to suppose that some daring souls have adventured into higher regions, surpassing mankind's common reach, and returned with news of the Creator. All such religions speak of God as being a God, at the least well-disposed, at the most loving and compassionate towards us. If every religious leader, if every sage and prophet of the past who has declared this to be true is utterly deceived or deceiving sanity demands an abandonment of all that is decent in life, a turning towards ruthless savage selfishness, and a cynical surrender of all hopes for the future of this muddled and muddling race of ours. We must then accept the doctrine of Oswald Spengler, Spengler, German apostle of pessimism and force. That man is himself a beast of prey. Fortunately, most intelligent men do not think so. They do not worship reason to the utter exclusion of feeling, as do our modern intellectual coxcombs. Coxcombs. Coxcombs? Where they turn away from a religion like Christianity, they do not quite turn away from Christ. Where they desert their decaying Hinduism, they still hold to some kind of reverence for its former saints. And so the thought of God's benevolence is yet a hope and faith with many. All these people, however, with their education, accept the scientific story of evolution from barbarity to civilization. This story is not a complete novel, but only a serial story. The scientists, as I have said, so far have got hold of the last few installments only. If and when they receive the earlier portions, they will be compelled to revise their judgments. This notion that nature started by being red in the tooth and claw, creating the most bestial men and the most ferocious animals first, has been fashionable and popular among educated people for nearly 3/4 of a century. My question is now ready and is addressed to these people. If you believe in a benevolent God, how can you believe that He began His work of creation in such a foul manner? Is it not more rational to believe, on the contrary, that God began in accordance with His nature in the best possible manner by creating the noblest men and finest beasts? Is it not more rational to believe that this was His first intention, and that degeneration into barbarity, when it came, set in through these men and animals falling of their own volition and not by God's desire? The Bible story of the fall of man is only partly an allegory, but nevertheless it is a true one. We need to distinguish between a fall and a push. God never pushed His creation down into a worse condition, nor did He create a set of automatons which would work like puppets on a string. The fact that we fell is sufficient evidence that we were given enough freedom to fall. Yet, if all the assembled religious teachers of the entire universe and all the gathered prophetic luminaries of the firmament of history were to tell me that our Creator was wicked, cruel, and barbaric, I should disbelieve them. Even if the whole of the human race were to tell me that, I should turn away unconvinced. For my final proof that they were mistaken would depend upon my own inner experience, not even by clairvoyant perception of former phases of universal life would I rebut them, but by something infinitely more profound, more precious to me, and to me more irrefutable. Slowly and haltingly, humbly, and with oft-slipping feet, I nevertheless find myself creeping into the courts of the Lord with the passing years. And the closer I creep towards the divine presence, and the more I feel myself surrounded by a compassion whose breadth is limitless, and the more I find myself supported by a love whose nature is endless. But my thoughts, however luminous and however factual they may seem to my visionary mind, will seem but idle and rambling speculations to the cleverer, learned, omniscient men of modernity.